Joe, man, great to have you back. It's been a while. So we're going to talk about crypto. It's been about 6 months since I last did a crypto episode on the podcast, and obviously there was a lot of changes that have happened. I think it was maybe August, September that we shot that episode. I can't remember when I released it, but I know at the time Bitcoin was around $45,000. It would proceed to go up to $69,000 around Thanksgiving, and now here we are today. I don't know when this episode will actually come out, but we're February of 2022. Yeah. We're sitting just under 40,000, like 39,000. Yeah. So here's my question to you. What's the deal? Like, are we going up? Are we going down from here? Why do you think we've seen this precipitous decline, and why are we here today? I've got my own opinions, but I want to know what you think.
I've got several opinions behind that, okay. and you got to kind of look at where we come with the whole crypto market. Before it was thought of, just a bunch of retail investors were in that space. Now you got big money. So that's changed the landscape a little bit. And, we've got world pressures, going on right now. So there's a lot of things affecting that. I don't think anybody knows in the short term, but definitely for the long term, I think it's safe to say, I'm not a financial advisor, but I think it's going to go up and for the long term. And so certainly there's plenty if you felt like you missed out, you missed the bus. I don't think that's true. I think we're in the very early stages still. And even if it goes from here, I'm still a buyer.
Yeah.
It goes down.
So, I think from what I'm seeing in the news, there's a lot of talk about geopolitics playing a role. I mean, I think that obviously what's going on between Ukraine and Russia, and like I said, by the time this episode's released, who knows, whatever is going to happen over there may have already happened. I've got to believe there's a risk-off attitude in all the markets right now, not just in the crypto markets, but also in the traditional stock market. People want to flight to safety, but here's my question. What's safe right now? Like where would you put your money? Because we got inflation numbers came out last week, 7.5% inflation. So holding cash doesn't appear to be a good long-term strategy. I saw a chart that showed if you hold cash for the next 5 years, you're going to lose 33% of your purchasing power, obviously, if inflation was to stay where it's at. So if that's not a hedge, if the traditional stock market's not a hedge, and if crypto is not a hedge, and I think, and let me ask you your opinion on this. When it comes to crypto, the idea was, well, it's a hedge, it's a hedge, it's a hedge. So if inflation runs rampant, that's when crypto is going to shine. Do you think that's necessarily the case, maybe in the long run, but in the short run, do you think that's the case?
Do I think it's the case where people are a hedge against inflation?
Yeah.
Well, they compare it to digital gold. That's the comparison people are making to Bitcoin. People that don't understand it. Why would you buy gold? You would buy gold because you expect in the long run it's going to go up. It's a hedge against inflation, but it might drop in the short term. But that's not money that you're looking to go and say, hey, I want to have access to it. That's kind of your money that you've stowed away and you're keeping for later in your life, for your retirement, an emergency. And it'll probably go up in the long term, and I think that's why you buy it. It's a store of value. Some of these other coins people are getting out of. I don't think sometimes they understand, the utility of it. The markets. They're just trying to make a quick buck.
Yeah, well, all cryptocurrencies. I mean, obviously, a lot of our conversation here, we're talking a lot about Bitcoin, and the reason being is because it's obviously the granddaddy of them all. It's the coin that started it, but it has some unique features that make it different than a lot of the other cryptocurrencies. And the cryptocurrency term, just in general, it's kind of a misnomer. I mean, this idea that it's a currency, like people don't seem to understand. Like this is not the lira. This is not a Deutschmark. This is not a U.S. dollar. These things have value for a reason. What's your opinion on not only Bitcoin and its value and its utility, but what about these other currencies and what their value is? I mean, you and I have talked before, and people that may not know this, there's all kinds of, there's layer one solutions.
Yeah.
There's other solutions. These coins, in order to have value, they have to have some type of utility.
Sure.
So, if you were to advise someone that's looking to get into the crypto market, what would you say to them in terms of what they should be looking to invest in? Would you say, hey, look, put a little bit in everything? Or would there be certain projects where you would say, hey, look, this might be something? I know Bitcoin is one that's, I think it's got to be the foundation, cornerstone of like your investments, because I think it has the best chance of maybe holding its value over the long run. I think some of these other plays are more speculative. But I just wanted to ask you, like, what your opinion
Yeah,
is.
well, absolutely. I mean, don't do what I did. Jump in. Everything is going to the moon, and of course, when I got into the market, that was the scenario. Anything you put your money into, you are going to triple, and 3, 4, 5x your money, and then all of a sudden, it goes back down 75%, 90% of its original value, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't pay rent. I can't, people are spending a lot of money getting into it and out of it and thinking that they're going to make a lot of money. But I think if you're first getting into it, what you need to do is, dollar cost average into it. For those that don't know what that is, you put a little bit of money in it. And it's not going to break the bank. You look at it as a savings, and maybe once a month you do it monthly, $100 into Bitcoin or Ethereum, and then you kind of get into the markets. You see the trends of the markets, and because as you know, it's rapid pace. It's changing. What used to fly a year ago, the market's different now. So there's a change based on that. It's not the same trend. So that's what I would do. I would start small. I would get into Ethereum, Bitcoin, things like that, and then kind of branch out, do your own research, find out what is the use case for this. Why would I invest in this? And if you can't understand it, I certainly would not invest in it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, that was my first foray into the market was Bitcoin. It was the first thing I ever purchased. And then it took me almost a full year before I was willing to branch out. And of course, in the meantime, I watched the values of some of these things skyrocket. But I wasn't comfortable, didn't have enough knowledge, enough research at that point to be venturing into other projects. And I think the second thing I ever got into, I know, was Ethereum. But it took a long time just to get the comfort level there. And so obviously I think that's great advice. When it comes to dollar cost averaging, it basically comes down to the fact that you may not catch the market at the absolute bottom, but you're not going to maybe buy at the top either. I think you have to have a plan. You have to plan, and if you're going to get into this market and say, hey, listen, I'm going to allocate a certain percentage of my net worth to this market each and every month, regardless of whether it's up or whether it's down. That's how the 401k works, right? If you have a 401k, it comes out of your check. Like, you're not sitting there making the investment decisions. You've already set your allocation up, right, on the back end, and they take 10% of your check, they allocate it, and so you're going to end up buying the market when it's high, you're going to buy it when it's low, but over the long run, hopefully it goes up. I want to get into a little bit as to, the use case, especially for Bitcoin and in the current system that we find ourselves in, maybe also some of these other crypto assets, while they may be valuable. I think if anyone's been paying attention here recently, we see what's going on up in Canada. We have this trucker convoy that has had its funding shut down from GoFundMe, shut them down. Give, Send, Go was a second tool that was used for them to raise money. And regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum or your opinion on whether or not they should be protesting or not, I think we can all agree that you should have the right, number one, to protest and petition your government. At least in the United States, that right is enshrined in our Constitution. So you have the right to petition and protest. But I also think that people should be able to protest and also support those protests without the fear of retribution. I think there was a donor list that Give, Send, Go got hacked. And now I saw that, small businesses that maybe gave, $100, $200 are being doxxed. Their information's out there. People are attacking them. So I look at that and I say to myself, well, maybe this is a use case for crypto going forward, because it's outside of the purview perhaps of some of these, let's just say governments or outside actors that may wish to control the flow of money. But that's also the thing that's used against crypto a lot, is because it's used by nefarious actors. So what's your take on, is this a good example of why crypto could be useful in the future?
I think that's just one of many great examples of why we need it, because if I want to buy something from you, a product, maybe you have a garden, let's just say, and I want tomatoes out of your garden, but the government says, hey, Joe, you can't buy tomatoes from Derek. You can't do it, and we're going to make sure that we freeze your accounts so you can't do it. Well, with crypto, if you know how to safeguard your crypto, put it in a cold storage wallet, that money's yours. It's not sitting in the bank. They don't have access to it. Only you have access to it as long as you have the keys to it. So you have access. You control your money. You control your own destiny. You buy what you want, and you exchange goods and services or other coins as you see fit. And there's no intermediate government telling you what's best for you. You get to make that own decision for yourself. And I think that's, you see what's going on around the world. You talked about Russia, certainly the thing in Canada going on. What would you do if you were in that situation and you wanted to eat or, you want to feed your family? And the government says, no, we're going to make sure that you can't because you were on a list over here. And we're just going to make sure that
we don't agree with your political views. We don't necessarily agree. You're holding the wrong views.
Sure.
And so if you don't hold the views that go along with our views, we're going to need to control your speech. And one way we can control someone's speech is basically to control their ability to pay their mortgage, to pay child support, to pay for food. I mean, that's a pretty powerful use of force. For, in my opinion, a situation in which that use of government power is way, way, way over the top in relation to what the true risk is. But it does give you pause for concern. Now, here's the other question. Knowing that, fiat currency, which is what we all use all over the world, no currency currently really has a backing. We went off the gold standard under the Nixon administration in the United States. So, we don't have a physical backed currency. It's basically the currency is backed by the full faith and credit of the government, which really means the power of the government to tax, enforce, jail, etc. I mean, if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to jail, right? If you print currency and just, make it up, if you and I printed currency, we would go to jail. Obviously,
Absolutely.
we put it on a printer. But if the government decides to, I don't know, print $2 trillion over the course of the pandemic and flood the market with all this money that then leads to 7.5% inflation, apparently they are the only ones that have the right to use that printer. And we all suffer the consequences of it. I guess what I would say to you is I love what you're saying in that, hey, with crypto, you control your money, but do you really think the government, do you really think the powers that be are going to just let their power just be taken away from them so easily?
Well, there's already proof that there is some kind of resistance with some factions within even our government, because if you look at what's going on in El Salvador, for anybody listening that doesn't know, Bitcoin is legal tender there. Well, there's a bill that's been floating around Congress where the United States government's trying to look into that to see if it creates or poses a financial risk because they're on the U.S. dollar. Mm-hmm. And if so, do we need to place laws to restrict it or regulate it? And, El Salvador is a sovereign country. Mm-hmm. So you look at things like that. The whole idea of decentralization is it gives the money or the currency, whatever that is, whatever you want to call it, back to the people. So you control your own money, you control your own destiny, and you're not at the whim of your government. So that's what's really appealing to me. It may be a different reason for you, but I'm an investor. I see that this is the way the world's going. It's if you educate yourself about what it really is, the idea of cryptocurrency, it's not just the money. It's just not, it has utility. There's lots of use cases in the world because the technology is an improvement on what we currently have. Change scares people. But I think it's a worldwide phenomenon that you're not going to be able to stop. So either our government's going to try to stand in the way of it and maybe successful at doing that for a short period of time, but small pockets of people all around the world, you can't stop the entire world unless you have one government that controls the world, and we don't have that. So
not yet.
Yes. So we don't have that yet, and and while we don't have that, but we're borderless too with cryptocurrency. I can go to El Salvador and spend my Bitcoin just like I could here, and not change the money over and pay somebody a third party a fee for doing that. I don't have to pay a fee for that. I'll just give it to you. Here. I transfer the Bitcoin into your wallet, and we have a transaction. I don't have to pay a fee to Western Union or any of these other third parties, and it can't be compromised.
Yeah, yeah. I think the problem is people don't realize, like, in our current financial system, everybody's taking a cut, right?
Everybody's taking a cut.
Visa's taking a cut. MasterCard's taking a cut. The banks are taking a cut.
The banks.
They're doing all that. The ability to have your own money that you control, you can decide who you lend to. You can decide at what interest rate that might be. Like the decentralized finance that is capable. I kind of feel like if the governments of the world decide they want to stop cryptocurrency in the short term, they have the ability to not only stop it, but the prices we see currently, I mean, they would crater. The prices would absolutely be impacted if governments around the world decided to ban it. I mean, China put forth a crypto ban. There was a lot of discussions back in the spring of 2021 when we got to $65,000 on Bitcoin and then saw the precipitous decline thereafter that, China's crypto ban was part of it. Although if anybody's been paying attention to the crypto market, China's banned crypto like 20 times over. So It should have been old news at that point. But I know like this past week, the Russian central bank said, we think there should be a crypto ban, but there are people within the Russian government that came out and said, well, no, I think it needs to be regulated. Sure. And there's also talk under the Biden administration that an executive order will be coming out any day now where they kind of put forth, some framework as to having government entities do a deeper dive and investigation into it. And here's the reason they say they want to look into it because it's a national security risk. Sure. It's like I'm hearing all the things. I feel like the things we're seeing with El Salvador, with their decision to make Bitcoin a legal tender, with the decisions in Canada where we see that people are saying, hey, look, if GoFundMe isn't going to play ball, if GiveSendGo is going to be hacked or not have the ability to get their money, because what was happening was the Canadian courts were coming out and saying, well, even if you got the money, it's illegal for you to give them the money. Right. I think governments are waking up to like this cryptocurrency is a real thing. Now, I agree with you. I think in the long term, it can't be stopped because it's the network effect. It's like trying to stop the spread of religion, trying to stop the spread of Islam or Christianity, trying to stop the spread of the internet. Like it's the democratization of currency the same way we've had the democratization of information. So I don't think in the short term, I think in the short term we do have some concern, but in the long run, I think you're right. There's probably very little that governments can do to stop it. I guess another question that I ask you, and just wanted to get your opinion on this too, looking at the other cryptocurrencies, there's this whole talk about outside of Bitcoin, Facebook changes their name to Metaverse. Exactly. And for people that aren't paying attention, what's your take on how these technologies, Ethereum, Avalanche, Solana, Cardano, these layer one solutions, what do you think that I could feel like it's kind of a similar thing, but maybe on the internet side, in terms of like what it could do for the democratization, what Bitcoin can do for the democratization of money. I feel like those layer ones could do for the democratization of information. And so I wanted to get like your take on how you think they're going to play going forward.
Well, you think about this in the society that we're moving to anyway. 20 years ago, I knew everybody on my block. I go and knock on the next door neighbor's door and say, hey, can I borrow a cup of sugar or whatever it was, Nowadays, we don't know our neighbors. We're all inside. We're on Facebook, Instagram, social media, all these different platforms, TikTok. And we kind of live our own lives individually the way we want to. And then we come out to public when we need things or we want to integrate with other people. But most of our lives is spent watching some kind of digital platform. We're starting to move towards civilization. It's a different point in time. I mean, if you can imagine, say a concert where the artist doesn't have to leave the studio in their own home, mm-hmm. and they stream it in virtual reality. And you have an NFT, a non-fungible token that allows you access to that stream. And so you have 30, 40,000 people at a concert in virtual reality, without even leaving your home. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of technology we're talking about here. So I know there's a lot of people that probably can't understand that. Why would anybody want to do that? But the fact of the matter is, we're living lives out of the comfort of our homes.
Well, we're getting older, and the people that are younger than us, I mean, that's the world that they grew up in. So to us, this may sound foreign. I mean, I know back when I first got into Bitcoin, I bought it. I think I've said this in the prior episode. I'd bought my first Bitcoins under $10,000 a coin, and I remember going to spend some time with some neighbors, and all my neighbors that I was hanging out with that afternoon were over the age of 50. And I talked about Bitcoin, and they all looked at me like I was crazy. Yeah. And every time I would see them over the next few months, I'd say, hey, have you looked into this? Have you looked into that? And they just didn't believe it was a thing. And I explained to them, I said, it doesn't matter what you think in your head as to what, I mean, the same thing could have been said during the 1950s when Elvis Presley was, coming out with what would later become rock and roll. You could say that's not music or that's horrible, but at the end of the time, you can't stop the progress. That progression is going to be carried, that mantle is going to be carried by the younger generation. So I think you're right. The future where we're watching concerts using NFTs in a world of virtual reality, like that may seem foreign to you and I because we enjoy, physical contact with the rest of the world, and we want to go and experience that in real life. That will be the version of real life. Because I think the other thing we're missing out on is with the advances in technology, I mean, we're going to come to a world where vast swaths of the things that we take for granted that we do as jobs every day, a lot of that, especially if you're like in a service sector, that all those jobs are probably going to be handled by AI. We already are talking about, self-driving vehicles or trucks that are able to deliver goods and services across country. I would obviously encourage anyone out there that's a younger person, listen to me and heed these words. If you can learn a trade, because those are going to be the last things that are going to be automated. It's going to be very hard to automate some of these trades. But, I'm in insurance. You're in the real estate game. There certainly are people competing in our platforms currently to try to make us obsolete.
Absolutely.
And so that
Absolutely.
we don't exist anymore. So I think, if you think that that's not the future, I think you're kidding yourself. So I definitely think that. I mean, what is your take on this whole idea of Web 3.0, that we're going to have a new internet that's going to replace the current internet that we have? I mean, do you think that the cryptocurrencies that exist, that they could be the future? And if so, why would we want a new internet?
I think they're building it now. I think, they're building the infrastructure as we speak for that kind of thing. And when you talk about what we have now, I guess that's being considered Web 2.0. Mm-hmm. So, the idea of Web 2.0 was the same as we have now. I mean, it was great when in the theory, but then you had big corporations that, Facebook, now Google, Apple, Microsoft, they control what we're seeing on these different digital platforms. They control the information. If they don't like a particular view, they make sure that gets filtered. If they don't like what you say, that gets filtered. They've got too much power. And I think the Web3 redesigns that, and it takes the centralization out of it. So you control your information instead of, Instagram, tracking your data and selling your data to a third party. Well, it gives you back the control of that. So you can monetize your own time. It gives the power back to the individual, the user, and that's the whole idea behind cryptocurrency, behind Bitcoin. It gives the power back to you for your spend. But also in Web 3.0, your time, your data. Data is a big money driver in the economy. People buy data. People buy your information so they can market to you. And this puts it back in your hands, what you allow people to see, what they have access to. And if you want to sell that access, there will be, I'm sure, a way to do that through crypto.
Yeah. Well, there has to be some type of change. I mean, I think in the late 1990s, the early 2000s, up until this point, I think, the internet was the democratization of information where everyone had access to more. You have access to more information in your cell phone, in your pocket right now than any person has ever had in the history of the world. And it was the wild, wild west for most of that period of time. I mean, think about it. Let's go. It's 2012. It's 2013. Were there any discussions about, big, large corporations, multinational corporations censoring people's speech or telling them they couldn't speak? I think what it could do, like you said, is allow us to control what information we see, what information we read, what information we put out to the world. But I get very concerned when I hear people say, well, freedom of speech is a right to make sure the government doesn't abridge your right to speak. And by the letter of the law, that is correct. I mean, I have the right to say whatever I want to say on this podcast. However, YouTube could censor me and take me off if I say something that maybe was not what was against their community guidelines. And I'm not saying that they don't have the right to do so. Obviously they do. But at the same time, there used to be, it seems like to me, a cultural idea amongst all of us. We all shared, at least in the United States, we shared a common belief that, the freedom of speech was a fundamental right. And while, yes, by the letter of the law, it's to keep the government from being able to abridge those rights, we need to understand there's other power in the world besides the power of the government. Like, the government doesn't need to usurp its power over your speech if they have other tech oligarchs that are willing to do that on their behest.
Sure.
I don't need to take your speech away because I'll make sure that Facebook and Twitter and Spotify or whoever else I deem necessary does that for me. And so I feel like we're in a world right now where people are self-censoring. Sure. We're afraid to say the things we want to say because we're afraid of what could happen. And I never can think of a time in my life, and I'm sure you can't either, where you felt like, well, if I say the wrong thing, then, maybe I donated $40 to a trucker convoy. Maybe now I get taken off every social media platform and lose my ability to be bankable. Sure. So maybe that's where Web3 could come in and make a big difference.
Absolutely. There's a lot of things going on in our world that are changing, not just in the crypto sphere of things, if you will. We're just at a different time. Certainly in this country, there's been drastic changes that have probably started 5-10 years ago, and I think people are a lot more cautious now about just about everything they do. But, years ago when we were younger, if somebody said something that was maybe racist or out of tone for the environment, we as a group in that environment would handle that. Hey, we don't talk like that here. That's not the views that we have, and we kind of policed our own. Mm-hmm. But now you're having other people do it for you, and now they're taking another step. They're deciding their take on it. It's very easy to twist. Hey, well, this falls in line with this, so you follow this person. Maybe you follow Donald Trump on Twitter. Now, you know what? You're in the same category as we view him.
Guilt by association.
Guilt by association. And so that's what it's become. And, so everybody's guarded. And, I certainly would I certainly would look into the future and say, hey, Web 3.0, if you will change that. Certainly.
Yeah. And I would encourage anyone, we're talking about these things, you look at what companies could be the future in Web 3.0. And so you talk about the Ethereum, the Avalanche, the Solana, the Cardano, these are the blockchains that the future, Web 3.0 might be built off of. And I tell everyone, I say, look, if you look at the internet in the 1990s, there were all kinds of .com companies that came, and we had the .com bubble burst, right? And then out of the ashes rose your Googles, your Amazons. And it's the same thing in this. I feel like we're early on, and there's very much the real possibility that, the cryptocurrency that you may be falling in love with and you may think is the future may very well not be. It's very possible. I know during the last, it used to be, you and I talked about this before we started recording, but, it used to be the crypto market moved in a 4-year cycle.
Yeah.
You had this bull and bear market. Right now, I don't know what kind of market we're in. I don't know if we're going up or we're going down from here. Who knows?
Sure.
But if you look back 4 years ago to 2016, 2017, the top 10 crypto projects that were out there, a vast majority of them, with the exception of probably Bitcoin and Ethereum, they don't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
They're dead projects. And so it's very much a possibility that the Cardano, the Avalanche, the Solana that we invest in today could very well be replaced by something bigger and better in the future. But I think it's also important that if you're going to invest in the crypto space and you do believe in this future of decentralization, that you spread your assets around a little bit, because they are speculative in nature. Don't fall in love with something and think like, well, this is going to make me a millionaire. It could make you a millionaire, but I would certainly. There was a guy. I don't know if you've seen any of this stuff, Joe. There was a guy that I saw. He put, I think it was $5,000 into like 10 different crypto projects in 2017, and he showed like 7 of those projects went completely bust.
Yeah,
but the 3 that hit made him a millionaire.
Sure.
But if he would have just believed in 1 or 2, he could have believed in the wrong 1 or 2. So I would encourage people to, if you do believe in this future, Spread your investments around and diversify those investments.
Well, you have, I guess, what they would call meme coins. It's hard to believe something like Doge or Shiba Inu would, crack the top 10. But you have a lot of retail investors that know nothing about it. I'm gonna throw $100 in. I'm just gonna see where that goes, and they lose $100 or they make 1,000. Some people a lot more than that if they get in at the right time. And so the phenomenon around it that drives retail. There's something to be said about the meme coins. I mean, I don't really invest in those. I don't know about you.
Well, they're not investments. They're obviously speculation.
Speculation.
But I think I learned my lesson, which was because I do know so much about crypto because I've been in it for a little while. I look at that and immediately would write it off and say, oh, well, Shiba's just, this is a joke, but failing to realize the power of network effect, the same power effect that drives Bitcoin drives the value of these things. So even though, and I will talk about this in a second, I'm glad you brought these meme coins up. Even though I might not agree that they have the same value as Ethereum or Bitcoin, I can't argue with the Wall Street Bets guys that took GameStop to the moon, that took AMC to the moon.
Sure.
You have to understand network effect when it comes to these meme coins. You have to.
Absolutely. And, there was even a time where I was like, well, maybe I need to allocate a little bit of funds to this. I saw some people get really rich, and I saw some people lose their shirt too. And, it's do your own research. But, I feel bad for the retail investor who goes in with the hype. And hey, I'm gonna do this. Then they get burned because they don't know what they're doing, and then they turned a negative look to, hey, I don't like this. This is not for me. It's something bad they associate it with because they had a bad experience, and it's certainly not that. I mean, you got to do your research. I mean, if you're taking your investing advice from some guy that put a meme on Instagram, then that's probably the wrong thing to do,
Well, I think the problem is people fail to realize that, by the time you hear about a stock, by the time you hear about a cryptocurrency, if you're not in that marketplace and everybody's out here talking about this stock or this, you've already missed the boat. Like, it's already taken off. They said during the Great Depression, right before the stock market crash occurred in the late 20s, they said, the shoeshine boy was giving stock advice. Right. Like when the shoeshine boy is giving you stock tips, it might be the indication that, hey, we might be at a top right now because now it's just become so frothy. And, I wish I could go back in time because I probably would have divested myself of some of my crypto holdings right before Elon Musk went on to SNL in the fall.
Yeah.
Because when he did that was at the height of Doge. That's when Doge was at its height. And that should have been the top signal to say, hey, listen, we're a little bit overheated. Going back to Shiba Inu, I remember back in October around Halloween, it was all the rage. Shiba was taking off. And I had people asking me about it because they knew that I was investing in cryptocurrency. And they said, well, what are your thoughts on Shiba? My fiance or my friend told me to put my life savings into it, that it's going to go to $1. Guys, Shiba's never going to $1. Let me be clear. And here's the reason why. Because what we fail to realize with these meme coins is it's the same thing with stocks. You take Class A shares of Berkshire Hathaway. I don't know what they're worth today, but several $100,000 a share. Why? Because there's very few shares. There's a few number of shares, hence their value. The problem with Shiba Inu is there's like trillions of coins. And so I told somebody, I said, if a Shiba Inu coin became worth $1, it would be worth more than all of the money, the assets, the real estate, the stocks in the entire world.
That's for the record.
But people, they don't understand that. They're just looking at the price. The price, and that's why Bitcoin is, that's why people don't understand, like, why is Bitcoin selling or was selling for 65 or 69,000 or today 39,000? It's because there's 21 million that will ever be mined. There's a finite amount. Shiba Inu, there's 21 trillion. I don't even know what the number is, but it's a lot. And so that's the reason why they don't have the value that traditional cryptocurrency may have.
Well, I think there's a lot of hype, especially when you came into the beginning of this bull market, maybe at the end of 2019, going into 2020, that new year or whatever, you saw a lot more retailers jumping in. And like in past cycles, bull markets, you get a lot of retail investment. They jump in, and then there's that kind of a blow off top where these coins go to the moon. And then they have these large pullbacks. People are starting to lose money. The retail investors get out of it. The whales come back in and take those shares at those coins at low dollar amounts. And so, there's a lot of people out there now that the retailers are scared, but you have big money in now. And right when the market seems like it's getting ready to go up, and you're like, all right, it's 40,000, 45,000. Bitcoin 40. All right, we might hit 50K here. Oh, back down to 39. And there's a lot more factors at play now. You've got people buying leverage. You've got big money going in there buying leverage and then getting wiped out. Because if it goes down 5%, then they have to liquidate.
Yeah, for people who don't understand what leverage is, basically there's exchanges out there where you can put up a Bitcoin and say, look, I'm betting that the price is going to go up, or I'm betting the price is going to go down. Now, this kind of leverage exists in the stock market as well,
sure.
But in the crypto markets, it's kind of unregulated. It's the Wild West. And so somebody could take out 100x leverage, and just to give an example, if Bitcoin goes up 5%, they would go up 500% because it'd be 100x on that 5% move. And so people are making these bets. Well, it makes the crypto market super volatile because even a small move up or down. And so what happens is if the price does, if a whale, which is someone who owns a lot of crypto, see, Joe and I, we speak this language, so I got to always remember, like, they may not know what that is.
Sure,
but
sure.
If a whale, which is someone that has a large crypto holding, decides he wants to push the price down by offloading and selling a bunch of crypto, he knows that these guys that have leverage, they've got stop losses set where if the price drops below 37,000, then they're going to be required to sell all of that crypto. Well, what happens is it cascades in a waterfall. So 37,000 gets taken out. All those guys are forced to liquidate. Well, what does selling do in a market? Selling makes the price go down. So then it hits 36. Well, now you have another set of guys that are at 36,000. They have to sell to cover their losses. And then it just keeps happening. And that's what's happened in the crypto market. If we have too much leverage in the market, and that's one thing I would love to see regulated in the market.
Me as well.
Because I think it is not good. There's too many people taking speculative bets in the market on the price going up or down, which is why you'll see Bitcoin, take these huge swings up and down because of this leverage that's in the market.
Well, you got whales that can control the market. I mean, if you look at Doge, I think something like 20% is owned by one wallet. With or one group. Of people. That's, I think that's another, while other people are scared, like governments and things like that. Well, hey, somebody could come in and control it and manipulate it, but you've already got that in the stock market. And I would argue that it's probably worse.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing. I've heard people say, it's a Ponzi scheme. Well, if it's a Ponzi scheme, then everything's a Ponzi scheme.
Sure.
People have to really take a step back and ask yourself, like, if cryptocurrency, and in here, I will preface this by saying there are things we don't know. We don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, actually is.
Sure.
This whole thing could be a psyops.
Yeah.
And we could be all in part of a Russian or Chinese plan that we're unaware of, that this is to destroy that's all possible and feasible. Although 12 years in, I feel like, that probably would be worked out by this point. If they were going to, I think they would have wanted to tank it. They would have done that a while back, and they haven't yet. So I always go in this with open eyes, understanding that, like, look, there are certain things we're not going to have all the answers to. We're not going to know everything clearly. Some things could be going on, or some things could be afoot that are even beyond our scope of understanding of what could actually happen.
We're just a couple guys on the podcast, man.
We're just a couple of guys talking.
That's all this is. We're a couple guys talking. There's things at work beyond us, but if you look at the trends and you look where we're headed, when big money is buying in this, when you've got, as we call them, whales, when you've got, they're putting millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars into this industry. When JP Morgan starts advising its high net worth clients, maybe you should allocate 1 to 5% of your portfolio into Bitcoin or crypto. Then you kind of know that, hey, this is for real.
Yeah, I was reading a statistic earlier today, and it was saying that 76% of the world's wealth is held by those age 65 or older. That's the reality, because obviously, young people don't have a lot of assets and resources, and the older you get, the more you accumulate. And if just 2% of the assets that are controlled by that group of 65 plus. See, 65 plus, they view Bitcoin, at least currently, as, oh, it's a hobby, or they may not have even heard of it, but it's certainly not something that they would invest in. My dad, he's 75. He's talking the other day about wanting to invest in stocks that pay dividends. I mean, that's where their heads are at.
Sure.
But if you get to the point, and it will happen in the future, because what I tell people now is the 45-year-old and the 55-year-old today is the 65-year-old 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And those guys, I can tell you, I've got friends that are in their late 40s, mid 50s, even late 50s that are investing in crypto. And it's not just the realm, I mean, even me, a guy in my 40s, this is not the realm of like just 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds. There are people that are investing in this, and that is the future. And I say, if I think 2% of all the wealth that those 65 plus control, if that was to be allocated to cryptocurrency tomorrow would 10 or 15x its current prices. And so what you said earlier, you cannot stop this train in the long haul, because here's the reality. When those people, when the baby boomers, when they pass the torch to the younger generation to take the mantle, I mean, think about who we're controlled by now. I think the Speaker of the House is like 83 years old. Our president's 75, 76 years old. I mean, these guys are on their way out. When they pass that mantle down to the younger generation, in their wealth too, as they pass away and their wealth gets transferred, what do you think people are going to do with that money? Do you think they're going to trust in the system that, is trying to control what they say, who they interact with, who they're allowed to associate with? Or do you think they're going to say, you know what, I'm going to put a little bit of my assets into this cryptocurrency thing? I'm not talking about all their money, but even 2% could 10 to 15x the entire market.
Well, I think it's going to, what people don't understand is it's going to create an equal playing field for people. We live in a great country. We live in the United States of America, but let's go, say, Africa, where the farmer wants to get a loan to buy a tractor so he can, work on his farm, but he doesn't have a credit score. He doesn't have any of that. Never has really went to a bank. So he goes to a bank. What does that bank say? Hey, you've got no credit. We're going to give you the loan, but we're going to charge you 80% interest. Mm-hmm. So every month he's struggling to make that payment, and they charge him outrageous prices just to borrow money so he can buy a tractor. When Cardano's doing a lot of work in Africa.
Terra Luna too is another one that's big over there.
So I'll tell you what, I'll loan you that money peer to peer, and you don't have to pay me back near as much. Not 80%, let's say 20%. Let's be reasonable. I make 20% on my money peer to peer, and you get the loan and the tractor, and we don't even have to deal with the bank. Because what does the bank do? They take your money when you put it in your bank account, and they lend it out at 10, 20 times. Right?
It's even worse than that. Here's the thing, and I'll say this. People want to know, like, how does, we keep talking about inflation and how does all this money that's being printed get into the system? The way that you just described it's how it used to work. It used to work that you put money in the bank, and then the bank would lend your money to me, and they would charge an interest rate, and that's how they made their profit, was the interest that they charged. Now we're in a point where there's not even, there used to be a thing in banking where the bank had to have a certain amount of reserves. It was called fractional reserve banking. They had to have a certain amount set aside that they would have to keep in reserve for every loan they gave out. Well, since the pandemic began, that all went out the window. So now there's no fractional reserve. So basically banks are making money off of money, which has never happened in the history of the world. And people are like, what do you mean? I mean, a bank tells you, I'm going to give you a loan for $50,000, Joe, because I believe you'd be a good risk. Well, how does the bank get the money? Well, they go to in our case, in the United States, they go to the Federal Reserve, they get the money. Sure. They're borrowing it at basically 0%. Have been up until now. We're raising the federal funds rate a little bit, but essentially at nothing. And then they're charging the spread, which is, maybe they're giving you a 4% interest rate. They're making 4%. Yeah. They're literally making money off money with no requirement that they keep anything set aside in reserve for that. Like, this is robbing people, robbing that farmer, robbing you, robbing me of our hard-earned money, because now our purchasing power has been reduced. I think what the blockchain does is it makes that where you can do that peer-to-peer loan because there's trust. So that's what people don't realize. You can't fake what's on the blockchain, what's on these cryptocurrencies. The blockchain is basically just an advanced ledger system. It's like an advanced form of accounting, and you cannot fake what is in that blockchain. So, maybe you wouldn't be willing right now to loan somebody that you didn't know in a foreign country money to purchase something. But if it was on the blockchain, at least there would be a record that is immutable. It cannot be changed. And that's why you'd be willing to do a peer-to-peer loan using the blockchain.
Well, let's look at it just in the essence of, well, maybe I'm not willing to loan somebody in a foreign country, but let's just say maybe somebody in my neighborhood or my, immediate area. John, he's starting a new business and he needs a loan. The bank's going to rob him. He's going to pay fees and all these extra things that they throw in, administrative fees. He's going to have to pay back the loan. They're going to charge him a high interest rate. And I'm going to say, John, I've known you 20 years, man. Here's the money, and you pay me back. Yeah. And it's peer to peer, and there's no fees. It's you pay me back what we agree upon, or I get the business, or I get the whatever you decide. You kind of cut the third person out, and that's where I think the banks are. They don't want to be cut out of the equation.
Which just means they're going to try, and the government's going to, with their authority, going to try to do everything they can to limit and stop. And don't for a second think when you hear a government talk about a CBDC, a central bank digital currency like the United States, don't think that's the same thing as a cryptocurrency. The government has one.
It's centralized.
It's centralized. And if they had that authority, let's say you make a post on Twitter they don't agree with. Let's say that you refuse to get a child vaccinated before they go to school. Let's say that you don't want to abide by whatever the latest rule the government has put forth. If you don't abide by that, they could suddenly cut off your access to funds. I mean, in the current system that we have now, granted, there's lots of room for nefarious actions to take place. People can embezzle money. People can funnel money, to bad actors. People can obviously use it as ransomware, all the rest. But at the end of the day, you still have the ability to maybe have some money that's outside of the system off the books. Let's say you don't believe in the banking system. Currently, you could go and withdraw all of your money and put it under your mattress. Now, I don't recommend that you do that. I think it's pretty risky, but at least you have that ability. If you go into a world where the governments decide we're going to put forth these central bank digital currencies, they have the full control of how you get your money, when you get your money. Look at all the issues that come around tax time, trying to get your refunds to you or trying to get your advanced child tax credit to you. In the future, they can easily put that money into your account, but they can just as easily do what? Take it out of your account. You won't even need to file tax returns. They'll have all the power. So I think people should be leery of, there's one thing if the government regulates the current system that we're trying to operate in to try to make it more fair, but I have a big concern when the government starts talking about, well, we're going to introduce our own cryptocurrency. We're going to introduce our own central bank digital currency.
I think what you're going to see as far as regulation is, they're kind of taking a hands-off approach now. Like, we know it's there, but we're kind of waiting to see how it plays out. But now it's gotten so big that, all right, now we have to do something because you're keeping big money from coming in and jumping in. I mean, there's already like ARK Investments. There's already people with big money, Michael Saylor, in the Bitcoin space. But in order to have true adoption, there needs to be regulation, and we know that.
Because there's a lot of people that are afraid they're not going to put their money into something with the fear that the government could come out tomorrow and say, well, we're banning it or we're outlawing it.
Right. And I think the U.S. government realizes that. But at the same time, they want to be able to control it. So what I think you're going to see is they're going to control the on and off ramps. That you're able to transfer it into fiat, or how you transfer it from BTC to U.S. dollar. Yeah. Or whatever currency, fiat currency you pick, they're going to control that, and they're also going to control KYC, know your customer. So there's going to be regulations. If you want to do business, you have to go through these processes to ensure you know who you're dealing with, and they can totally track it. They might not try to stop it, but I think they'll regulate it to the point, or at least try to, where they limit, they know everything about you.
But I think you and I are of the agreeance that I think that all is temporary, because I think we're seeing an uprising throughout the world of people starting to realize that the people that are in power might not necessarily have their best interest at heart.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, we've talked about a couple of examples just in the current media that we're seeing going on. But I mean, it really goes to the heart of maybe what happened when Bitcoin first came into existence. It came into existence in 2009 was the white paper and the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto, who wrote that paper, and it's kind of started Bitcoin in the current cryptocurrency world that we find ourselves in. But what was it born out of? It was born out of the financial crisis. It was born out of the excesses of banks and the people in power to just abuse it. And did anyone face any criminal repercussions for all those activities? No. No one faced any consequences for basically which was a grab of vast sums of wealth from the everyday average investor. They saw their stock in GM go to zero, as they got bailed out and new shares were issued. I owned shares in Countrywide Financial at the time. Angela Mozilla was the CEO, and my shares at Countrywide went to zero. They were bought by Bank of America. I didn't get Bank of America shares in exchange for that. The company was sold off to them, and then my shares became worthless. And so that's where you saw the Occupy Wall Street movement and all the rest. And I want people to realize, all this concern and question and maybe distrust in these centralized financial entities was born out of that experience. And there are people today that look back on that and say, look, we've played this game for a long time. And you know what? It's only benefited the wealthy, and the super elite have been able to take advantage of it. I mean, the everyday individual, the everyday person just doesn't have control over their finances the way they did. This whole idea of banking, the way that we operate now, people have to realize this is a relatively new phenomenon. This banking, the way we experience it today, is 150 years old, if that. Prior to that, it was much more local, on a local basis. You had your local bank, your local banker, people in your community, people lent money to one another. It wasn't these big entities that don't see you as anything other than a cash cow or a way to extract resources from you. So I think that's what is going to, in the future, no matter what the government tries to do and regulate, know your customer, on and off ramps. I agree with you on all of that's going to happen. But I just find a hard time believing that 20 to 25 years from now that is going to hold up in the long haul. Because I think the government's always going to try to do as minimal of a job as they can at the beginning to regulate. But then I think the more and more people get into crypto or get into this other world that's outside of fiat, the more and more they're going to realize the old system we had was broken and we've got to break away from it.
Here's what you risk if you don't jump in and do something, at least regulate, or at least say, hey, I'm on board or I'm not on board. Here's what you risk. You risk other countries. We said El Salvador, for example. Their GDP is... I don't know what it is, but I would say 1/50th of what ours is. I mean, it's a small number compared to our GDP. And so you take a small country like that, and now they're investing in Bitcoin. They're mining. It's part of the economy. And if other governments, Australia, let's just say Germany, all the big powers, the Western powers say, we're not for this, there's going to be a safe haven in these smaller countries like El Salvador or wherever else.
And you're going to cede all that power to those countries.
Shift.
Yeah.
And they're going to start to be, at least in the world stage, bigger players.
Yeah, you can't easily transport $100 million in gold, but it's really easy if all you have to know is your 24 passcode phrases for your digital crypto wallet. You can basically have access to your money anywhere in the world. In fact, if you could memorize those phrases, you don't even need anything, because even if you were to lose that wallet, your money is still accessible on the blockchain.
Yeah, and and it plays into the environment we're in now, because now, and COVID has shown us this, you can work from anywhere. I work with people that do business in other states, or have meetings with people in other states that they don't even live in, and so the idea of living anywhere you want. Well, do I have to live in the U.S.? Yeah. Do I have to, live in the U.S.? I could live in Portugal, and right now there's no tax on crypto. I could make $1 million in crypto and not pay any taxes on it for the time being. Why not?
And you could easily move around the world with your crypto assets, because they're not tied to anything. They're not tied to a government. There's no requirement, like you said earlier, to exchange them, to put them into a different currency, to pay exchange fees. It's like you just have your crypto and you can move and go wherever you want to in the world very easily. Let me ask you this, because we could talk about this stuff. Obviously, people can see forever. I wanted to ask you kind of before we end the episode, like what projects are you really interested in yourself, so listeners can get some ideas to the things that you're looking at. So I want to ask you, like what are some projects that you've got your eyes on, maybe that you're invested in, and then tell me like what your use case or your rationale was as to why those were projects you wanted to be invested in.
Well, I think layer ones are a pretty safer bet.
Can you explain for the listeners what a layer one solution really is?
Ethereum's a layer one solution. It's what it's the platform they build off of. So Solana. There's a lot of metaverse projects being built off Solana. It's kind of like I would to dumb it down a little bit. Computer language. How you're able to
like a coding language like Java, C++, things like that.
Sure, how I can communicate on the network with other users. But so Solana is a newer layer one, and they have a lot of gaming stuff that projects in the works out in the future. And so I think layer ones, Ethereum's the best known layer one. People would say if Bitcoin is digital gold, is this digital oil? I mean, because it runs everything. All these projects, gaming, play to earn games, and different metaverse things in the metaverse are ran off ERC 20 tokens. So Ethereum tokens. So I would say AVAX, Solana. I'm invested in, especially now on the pullback. Those are looking very attractive. Some of the numbers I want to get back into, but people are complaining about the high gas fees on Ethereum. And so you look at Polygon, at Matic, it's a layer two. It's going to offload a lot of that traffic to those layer twos. I like Matic. I think it's going to do some good things in the future. I like Cardano. You have people that love it or hate it. Yeah. But that's a long hold for me. Ethereum, Bitcoin, and I like VeChain, although it's not doing the numbers that I hoped it would do. I definitely think that in the future is going to do some big things. And what else do I have currently? I'm looking into ICP. I don't know. Have you looked into that?
I'm a little bit concerned about the centralization that goes along with that. I think it has maybe some use case, but sure. To me, the one downside to it is it kind of doesn't. If your use case is decentralization, there may be a little bit too much centralization in that project, but that doesn't mean that you can't make money on it. It doesn't mean that it can't increase in value. But it's definitely one where I would do my research and always, keep an eye on it, because obviously from where it came in at, I think it was $700 a coin or something when it came on. It's like $20 now, so it's obviously come down quite a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think the original people in on that offloaded a lot of their personal.
They
bag.
made their money.
Yeah. But Chainlink's another one I think is a powerful. It's an Oracle. It's basically the only. It's probably the strongest one out there in its space. Yeah. So I'm heavy on Chainlink. Probably buy some more because the price is where it's at. I mean, we've had a pullback. So
Yeah, I think people need to realize right now. I mean, what's going to happen is, and this is the fear, and I want people to take away from this episode is, don't wait until you start seeing Bitcoin back in the media that it's back up to 70, 80, 90,000. Like right now, from what I'm seeing on chain analytics, that's the one thing about cryptocurrency. They can actually see who's buying, how long people are holding these coins for, who's buying, who's selling. It's a lot more transparent than the stock market. When the price of Tesla goes up or goes down, you don't know necessarily what huge entity sold off a bunch of shares or bought a bunch of shares. But in crypto, we do. And if there's anything that's being true right now, the volumes are very low in the crypto space. And if you look at the YouTube videos that are out there, these different crypto YouTubers, their views are down, which means a lot of people have kind of given up on crypto and walked away from it. They're not paying attention to it. And this is exactly the time when you want to start paying attention. Now, would I go all in? Do I know that right now we're at the bottom? No, I don't know. Bitcoin's at 39. It could go down to 20. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm holding a little bit right now myself. Yeah. I want to see what happens.
Yeah. But I certainly would tell people that you're certainly not buying at the top. Clearly, if Bitcoin has been at 69,000 and 65,000, Ethereum, which right now I think this morning was at 2,700, it's been as high as the mid 4,000s. You would have to believe that we've seen the top for all time, that it's never to go back up. And I would just say to people, this might be your March of 2020 moment. You know, if anybody remembers in March 2020, when the virus hit, all of a sudden all major markets crashed. Gold crashed. Bitcoin went from $10,000 to $3,000. Stocks went down. If you would have bought, you know, shares of Tesla then, it would go from like $200, $100 a share up to $1,200. You would have 12x your money. Warren Buffett has a famous saying, investing is taking the money from the hands of the impatient and putting it in the hands of the patient. Sure. So I would say now is just as good a time as any to start dollar cost averaging in. I like all the projects you just said. I'm invested in pretty much all those same projects: Chainlink, VeChain, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, Bitcoin, a couple of others that I'll throw out there. Talking about gaming and the metaverse, I think, you know, these are some of the big players, but Sandbox is one that's good. Mana. There's a lot of Engine Coin,
Gala,
and those are the big ones. Gala, those are the big ones. There's a lot of smaller ones. They're speculative in nature. You certainly have to realize you're taking a risk; they could go down. But those are some things to maybe look at and to think about.
And I think when it goes to that, you spoke earlier when you were talking about technology changes. Some of the coins 10 years ago, aren't viable now. I think you're going to see the same thing in the metaverse. You know, you're going to see some of these gaming coins that are going to fall off. The best ones are going to survive. There's going to be new members, new players in the field. So, you definitely got to do your own research and know the people behind the projects and, make your best guess as to what it's going to do. Because right now, I don't think anybody knows where we're headed. But for the long haul, Bitcoin, Ethereum, that kind of thing. If you're just getting in the market, $200 here, $150 here, whatever, and have a little bit allocated. And it doesn't have to be a big part of your portfolio at all. But I think, because what I did is I bought some Bitcoin, bought some Ethereum, and then I wanted to buy everything that came out. Yeah. And you kind of had to, hey, wait a minute, I can't buy everything.
Yeah, you got to take your time with it and really think about, and like you said, dollar cost averaging. I couldn't recommend that more to people. Like, take your time getting in to these projects, and don't try to time the market. Don't try to say, well, this is the bottom, this is the absolute bottom, I'm positive of it. And if I've got $1,000, I'm gonna put all $1,000 in right this moment. Set a time schedule, invest over time. And I'm giving this advice because just like you, Joe, I've lived the opposite of it. I mean, I bought VeChain at 23 cents. It's currently at 5 cents.
Yeah.
And convinced it was going to $1, and it didn't. So, kind of anybody that's gotten into this space, it's a learn by trial and error. You buy, you have to, I think you almost have to suffer some losses to understand like what's really at stake. These things are highly speculative and highly risky. But I will say this, and this is the last thing to kind of end the episode. I will tell people, don't say to yourself, it's a risk and I don't want to take this risk. So I'm going to tell you, everything in life is a risk. When you get up in the morning, you're taking a risk. When you get in your car, you're taking a risk. If you don't invest in cryptocurrency, you're taking the risk that it could go up. If you do invest in cryptocurrency, you're taking the risk it could go down. If you decide to invest in the stock market, you're taking the risk that the market could go down. If you don't invest, the market could go up. So this whole thing of risk, life is all about taking risk. The question is, are you going to be taking the risk to where it has the chance to pay off? And in my worldview, if you don't invest in the crypto markets, yeah, you're going to be safe. You're not going to have to face any of the downside risk. But at the same time, if this market does what you and I and many others believe it could do, it could take off and you could be missing the greatest chance or opportunity of your lifetime. Or not. Correct. Yeah. Which is why diversification is key. Yeah. You're in the real estate game. Buy that investment property. If you don't own a home, buy a home. But if you have all of your other investments in order and you're looking for something else to maybe put some money in just for the long haul, I would say cryptocurrency is a great place to put it, and do your research. And Joe, with that, man, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we could talk about this for hours, man, days. But thanks for having me back on. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it, man.
Yep, you have a good one.
You too.